When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: The Revival. User: TR1UC3R. Posted April 16th, 1999.
They say the desert's a good place to dry out. Big skies, clean lines, nothing but you in the heat. I used to believe that. Used to tell myself that was why I stuck to the southwestern runs. Less temptation, fewer bars, more time to think, but you can only drive away from yourself for so long before you end up circling back to the same dark patch of road. Wherever you go, there you are. This was the summer of '86. I was 10 months sober and on my third real attempt, driving east with a trailer full of scrap and a back that ached like penance. Somewhere after midnight, I pulled off to piss behind a boarded-up Texaco, and that's when I saw the sign. It was just a piece of old plywood nailed to a bent fence post. The paint was flaking, but I could still make out the words, "Tonight only, revival service. All are welcome, deliverance at midnight." There was no address, no arrow, just a dirt path winding off the shoulder, half swallowed by weeds. I knew better. God, as I understood him, didn't hang out in places like that, but I'd had a rough day. The road was long, the silence longer, and something about that sign felt like a dare. Half measures availed us nothing, so I turned off the highway. The path jostled my rig so hard I thought I'd lose a tire, but a mile or two in, I saw it. An old clapboard chapel sunk at one corner like the desert was trying to bury it. Strings of Christmas lights blinked along the roofline, powered by a generator that coughed like a man dying of regret. The lot was almost empty, just a rusted Nova and a school bus with Jesus' love painted across it in what looked like motor oil. Inside, it was hotter than hell and smelled like mildew and old hymnals. The pews were maybe half full, every one of them taken by folks who looked like they'd wandered in from the edge of something. Junkies, drifters, folks with eyes that didn't blink right. Nobody looked at me. They just stared at the pulpit where a man in a bolo tie and cracked boots stood with a cassette recorder instead of a Bible. "Welcome, brother," he said without missing a beat. "We've been expecting you." I remember laughing under my breath, just a little, but it caught my throat. I didn't exactly plan on being here. He smiled like it heard every excuse in the book. No one does, but he brings you where you need to be. I took a seat. Don't ask me why. Maybe it was the way the air felt, thick and charged, like the moments before a storm. Maybe it was the silence in the room, the kind that presses against your eardrums. I sat down and folded my hands like I used to in those smoky little church basements back home. One day at a time, I told myself. The man hit play on the recorder, and what came out wasn't music. Not really a sermon either. It was mostly static, but underneath was a voice, low, crackling, halfway buried in the noise. I leaned in, trying to make out the words. Confess, lay it down, let him remake you. It wasn't the preacher talking. It was a recording of someone else, a man I recognized from somewhere I couldn't quite place. The guy beside me was muttering the words right along with the tape. His palms were pressed flat to the pew like he was bracing for impact. I asked him quietly who the voice belonged to, and he whispered back, Brother Pascal. I'd heard that name before, out on I-40 a couple months back, fiddling with the tuner, trying to stay awake. I caught a pirate signal out of nowhere, a man preaching in static, telling folks their sins back to him, word for word. Then he started singing this old song, I don't care if it rains or freezes, as long as I got my plastic Jesus. Well, I flipped the dial quick. Something about it made my skin crawl. The preacher stepped away from the pulpit. He didn't carry a Bible, didn't need to. The room was already his. Pascal's gone now, he said, voice smooth and dry. But he left behind sermons in the white noise, lessons in the dial tone, the word encoded in static, and tonight it's got something just for you. I stood up. I should go. You've been carrying something too long, friend, he said. You didn't drive all this way just to leave it rotting inside you. I didn't answer, but he stepped closer, everyone's eyes on me. Guilt isn't grace, he whispered. It's just rot wearing a crucifix. I felt my chest seize, my heart stuttered, my mouth opened without my permission. I killed a man, I said. In Lubbock, April last year, I was drunk, hit him outside a bar. Never even saw his face. I drove off. The room was silent. The tape recorder clicked. Then it started playing the confession back to me. My words, my voice, the exact tremble and pitch. Every syllable fed back like it had been waiting to surface. I backed toward the door. The people in the pews were all facing me now. The woman nearest the aisle was humming through her teeth. A man in the corner started sobbing, and the guy beside me gripped the back of the pew so hard his nails left blood on the wood. The preacher raised his arms. Tonight's your baptism. The frequency accepts your offering. I ran. Outside, the wind was up, the generator was sparking. I climbed into my rig and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned, but the radio came to life on its own. Volume maxed. Pascal's voice echoed through, muted like it was whispering from the bottom of a well. Wherever you go, he said, there you are. I tore the radio from the dash, yanked the wires out, tossed the whole thing into the gravel. I drove until the sun came up. Never saw the chapel again. Checked maps, asked around, even tried going back once a few years later. Nothing. That road ain't there anymore, if it ever was. I've been sober 5 years now. I work light freight out of Tulsa, keep to myself, but every so often in a parking lot or at a diner, I'll hear that damn song playing on some trucker's AM station, the one about plastic Jesus, and every time it sounds a little more like me singing it.
Subject, Wisps on the highway. User, CFP28. Posted, January 20th, 1996.
This winter has been brutal. We're 3 weeks into the year and have already gone through what they're calling the blizzard of 96. It got so bad that there's a line in the Muncie Evening Press police blotter about people stealing snowblowers, and that's a first so far as I know. Down in Jackson County, they got so socked in that my Uncle Carl decided to clear some of the roads on his property with a tractor and got killed when it went to gear without him. Poor guy tried to hop on and stop it, but he was too late. The rear wheels got him. He was pronounced dead at the scene. For me, it's been tough, but not as tough as it could have been. My girlfriend Elaine and I broke up just before Thanksgiving, which turned out to be a blessing because I was in my new place by the time the blizzard hit. I shudder to think what it would have been like to be stuck in our old place together. There's a good chance one of us might not have made it out alive. Having my own space made grieving for Carl easier too. Elaine wasn't known for her compassion. I'm renting an old farmhouse out on the country road near Buck Creek. It's a nice place to be, quiet and still, which is something I really need right now. The only downside is that during the storm of the century, that quiet started to feel isolating. But here's hoping I won't have to deal with that again anytime soon. There's only one thing about this house, or to be more specific, the area around it. It's hard for me to believe I'm actually sharing this publicly, but I guess who's ever gonna see it, right? It first happened maybe 2 weeks after I moved in, not that long before the blizzard set in. My buddy Danny and I were coming back from a league game and some beers at the Bowlamat. Danny lives a little further out than I do, so we'd started carpooling from my place. Honestly, I'm glad he was there because if it had just been me, I don't know if I would have believed my eyes. Maybe 300 or 400 yards up the road from my house, I slammed on the brakes because I saw what I first thought was an animal crossing the road. It didn't look like any animal I'd ever seen, but I think my brain was doing its best to present what I was seeing in terms I could understand. What was I seeing? Imagine smoky gray figures that would have been 10 feet tall if they'd been standing upright, running across the highway on all fours. Have you ever seen anything like that? I sure as hell hadn't. They move quick too, like deer on fast forward. In all, 4 of them crossed the road while we sat there, completely stunned. After they were gone, Danny and I sat there in total silence for about 10 minutes. When he finally spoke, it was to ask if he could crash on my couch because he didn't want to see that again. Since then, and the time leading up to the blizzard, and then afterward, I've seen these things another 4 times, roughly once a week, always on the county road, but in different places each time. A couple times I've felt like someone was watching me, even when they weren't actually visible, and it's become intense enough I can't leave my curtains open even a little after nightfall. I don't feel threatened at all, but even so, the sensation of being watched is uncomfortable. I finally decided to share this after what happened last night. It was on the way back from league again, but this time Danny had come straight from work, so he'd taken his own car and I was driving alone. It was snowy, but not whiteout conditions, just normal winter weather. About a half mile away from my place, I saw in my headlights a person standing by the side of the highway. They didn't look like the shadow things, smoky or wispy. They looked like a real human being. They were wearing blue jeans, a knit cap, and a thick fleece coat, but even so, I was concerned about them being that far out of town on foot, so I pulled a U-turn and went back to check on them. They were gone. That's right. In a matter of seconds, they were gone, and there were no footprints in the snow to indicate they'd ever been there. I felt a sort of panic start to well up in me, so I booked it straight home and locked the doors. The problem is that the sensation of being watched didn't ease up after I closed the curtains. In fact, all night it felt like I wasn't alone in my house. Sometimes it even felt like a cold wind was blowing on the back of my neck. A cold breath, maybe. No matter what I did, I couldn't shake the sensation that I had company in that big old farmhouse, and because of it, I spent a sleepless night with my bedside lamp on. Sometime around 4 a.m., I must have finally passed out because the next thing I knew, my alarm was going off. Today, I made a point of asking my supervisor, Joe, if I could take off early. I told him it was because I had an appointment at the bank, but really, it was because I didn't want to drive home alone in the dark again. The thing is, I can handle the smoky things. I can even handle disappearing hitchhikers, but what I can't handle is being unable to stop whatever it is from invading my space. Hopefully tonight is better because I really don't want to have to move again.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.